Okay, so there's 3 scary things about sergers. One is opening the box. People are afraid of that first step where they just get it out of the box and put it on the table. That's number 1. Number 2 that's scary is there's a moving knife. And there's lots of people who are afraid of the sergers for that reason. Use that as much as you can to keep your husband's fingers off, to keep your kids' fingers off, to keep the grandchildren, don't touch the serger, because there's a moving knife and you'll cut your fingers off. But the reality is that's not really good. But the third thing that terrifies people about sergers is threading. So we're going to break threading into, I'm going to say 3 pieces. So we're going to break our threading into 3 parts. This particular video, we're going to focus on getting the thread mounted on the posts, getting it up through those top little hooks, and down through the tension discs. So this is meant to be an easy to approach method to serging. At some point, this video will be completely moot for you, and you're going to be just looking at the next 2 videos. But for the first one, we're going to do the very, very basic first step, and that's mounting your thread and getting it through the tension discs. So let's start with that. So in order for me to do this, I'm going to be switching my serger back and forth. I am going to be using my H-Class 250S. The store sells a variety of sergers. The serger that's in the image that's on the front of this video is the Hobby Lock. We also sell the Husqvarna has another couple of different, the Husky Lock. So we've got lots of machines to look at. But for the purposes of this video, I'm just resting on my my standby machine, which is the Husqvarna Viking 250S. And it's a basic, does all the basic things very, very well. Serger, no fancy bells and whistles that are gonna, be mind-blowing, except for this one part that I just love. So we'll get to that in a future video, but for this video, we're gonna be talking about a lot of the back of the machine and then just a little above the eye line part of the machine. So I'm going to switch my camera for now. We're going to come back over to this. So this is the back of the serger, and so I've turned the serger right around so that we can see how threads mount on the back. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit here just to get us nice and close to the serger so you can see everything that's happening. And I think I go this way. There we go. So here's the back of the serger. And so you can see here what I've done is I've put one of these cone holders on, and weirdly I've put it upside down, and the reason for that is I have a spool of thread that I would like to stay nice and secure and not rattle around. So it stays on there. The thread's going to slip off the top. One of the other things that you can do when you're using a cone holder, and we do this with a lot of our spools, especially if the thread's going to, you can see it's quite snug, especially if the thread's going to fall off the cone, is we use one of these discs. And so this is a plastic disc, came in the case with the serger, and when I put it down like this, it's giving me a nice little resting spot for my spool. And that's going to keep the thread from falling off and getting tangled underneath here. It's not always necessary to use one of those. You can see the rest of the machine is not threaded with those. When the machine comes out of, this particular machine comes out of the box, it comes with those spools of threads on it. But now I've got a nice big cone of thread that I can use here. The other thing that these machines have are thread caps, and so you can see at the top of this particular spool, for example, I've got a thread cap that's holding the spool in place, prevents the thread from getting caught in here. But here's some little extra things about it. So I'm going to show you with regards to the yellow one and the thread cap to show you, and I have to just dip under here and pick up what fell down. Okay, so this is our spool of yellow thread. And so the thread cap actually not only covers the end of that spool of thread, it is actually a little bit bigger. And so when I've got my thread mounted on its post and I've got the thread cap on there, as the thread is coming off the spool, instead of rubbing on the top of the spool, and especially on some of the spools of thread that we used to purchase, there was a little cut in the top of the spool to catch the thread in. So as the thread's coming off there, it's not rubbing on the top of that particular spool of thread, it's rubbing on the cap as it's unspooling. And so that's what those caps do. They also keep the spools of thread on the post, because as you can imagine, at some point we're going to be racing with these machines, and what can happen is if that thread gets caught on something, then that spool of thread can come up. It's altering our tension, so that's one of the reasons that we use a thread cap on there to hold everything in place. This part of the sewing machine, so I'm going to back out a little bit again. So I'll just back out. Okay, so this part of the sewing machine right here is the thread extension bar. So it is often collapsible. So you can see here I can push that back down. So for traveling it would be down in this position, but it's really, really important that you have this at its highest point so that the threads are coming off and having a chance to uncurl and straighten out before they get to the thread guides. So this is the extension post. If for some reason you don't see one of these, you've got an unusual serger or it has been broken off, so it's time for you to go and get a new one put on. But that is an important part of the serging process. Everything about a serger is making sure that your thread tensions are consistent and reliable, and this produces that. On some sergers you'll see that there is a frame that is has several hooks and loops, and that's so that you can run your threads through whatever way makes it perfect. I liked for one of the machines that we have, I like to take the thread up through one of these little hooks and across to the next hook so that it comes down in a nice straight line and doesn't tangle with other threads. There are also little places on a lot of these machines where you can hang your tweezers, and so that's our tweezer holder we have on the machine. So then next, when the thread comes off of here, so the thread's going to come off the spool, and then when it comes off the spool and up into that cage up at the top and then down the other side, now we got to get it all under control. So this all keeps things from getting tangled, but then we got to get it under control. So we're going to then be using the thread guides. And if you look at the top of your machine, there's going to be a variety of ways that your threads are fed through a guide. In this machine that's beside me here, there's my extension table. The thread comes through that hook and then down to a bar, and each thread guide has 2 holes, and you look at your user's manual, but generally you're going to come down into this first hole and then around the bar and down the second hole, and that is to uncurl, untangle, get your tension just a little bit different. And that's what that's for. So if you've got 2 holes, you're going to be looking at your user's manual to see how it is that you should be putting them through the holes. In this machine, I actually have a little pressure hook, and so the pressure hook, the thread goes under the pressure hook and then it's feeding into a groove. And this machine up in the back, it's a similar little hole that they're coming through. There's a little, it's an easy to thread hole, so it's got a little guide, then you just pop it in, and then it's coming down into a groove. These are called lay-in tension. So when you've got threads that fall into a groove and then are going towards a tension disc like this, when it's coming into a tension disc that looks like this, then you're looking at a lay-in tension, and the tension discs are right here. So these are dials that control how close those 2 discs are to each other, and then in between here the thread rests, and there's a drag put on the thread to perfect your tension. This other machine that's beside me has what I would consider my the type of machine. This is the kind of machine I grew up with. I had a serger very, very early on, and so it is similar to the tension that was on the front of sewing machines for a long time, which is 2 discs with a spring, and you're looking at it from the front, and the discs are lying like this. The thread goes in between those discs, so there's a groove in here that the thread falls into, and then it progresses over to the side here. So that's this serger. You can see it's a very compact serger with a tiny little space right here, and the threads were proceeding through. And this is actually, of all of these sergers from this time frame, I do find this one a nice easy one to thread, except for that lower looper that everybody has nightmares about. So as we're coming down off of the thread spool, you're going to enter into a point of control, the point of control could be 2 holes, it could be a channel setting, it could be a clip, it might be a single hole that you thread through. And in the case of the serger that we're using as our example today, it's a little clip that the thread's going to slip under the clip and then fall into a channel setting. So that's getting to here. Now we have our tension dials, and we want to get our thread in between the tension discs. So to get in between the tension discs, you want to get your thread in between what you can see. And if you take your serger, and I think I said at this point, your serger probably doesn't even need to be plugged in. So if you take your serger and you turn it towards you and you raise your foot, if you look in between this area, and you're not going to be able to see it on this video, but I want you to look on your own machine. If you look into this area, as you raise and lower the foot, you're going to see those tension discs moving. And so a raised foot will mean the tension discs are apart. And when your tension discs are apart, that means that your thread can fit in between there nice and smooth. So raise your foot so that your tension discs are apart. Take your thread and lay it into the groove. So as it's laying in there, you're going to get your thread now to this point, and you can do that with each one of your threads. In general, you don't want your threads crossing, so the thread that is on the furthest to the right goes through the furthest to the right guide. Then with each post, you work your way across. This particular serger has apparently got a preference about threading. So to make your threading easier, we like you to thread from right to left. But in reality, you get to here, and at this point, it doesn't matter where you are in your threading process. You can be, you can go 1, 2, 3, 4. You could go 3, 4, 2, 1. You could do whatever you want till here, and that makes sure everything is going to be threaded in a nice even manner, going through the tension disc properly. Now there are people who have been taught to tie off their threads and then drag them through. This is the point at which that this is the first point in the process of threading where that knot can be a problem. So if you are tying off, it's really the best idea to remove your thread from your tension discs. So you can do that by just lifting this out. So I'm going to do that with this particular thread. So I've taken it out of the clip on the top and pulling it out of the discs, so it's out at the front here. And now I can pull a knot through. Don't pull a knot through your tension discs, especially if they're tightened up together, because that will cause you no end of heartbreak if you get a piece of thread caught in between there and then you're trying to figure out how to dental floss it out. So that's to there. So that's where we're going with this video. Is I'm just stopping at this point right here, and we're going to move on to the loopers next. But there you go. I think if you made it to here, you should be very proud of yourself because you got through the first third of the most terrifying part of owning a serger. And I say that tongue in cheek. All right, we'll see you in our next video when we're going to talk a little bit more about looper threading.